much of the attention over the weekend has been on the latest deadly shootings in Minneapolis and the ongoing anti-ICE protests that are taking place there. But the problems of Minneapolis go beyond that. As serious as that is, the problems go beyond that. In recent weeks, in fact, Democrats have largely tried to shift the attention to immigration and away from the rampant fraud that's taken place over decades there, at least over the past decade. But Republicans certainly have not forgotten. And at the state level, that's true. Also at the federal level. And joining me now with the latest of the fraud investigation that's underway in Minnesota is State Representative Walter Hudson. He serves on the Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Committee in the Minnesota House of Representatives. He represents District 30A in the northwestern Twin Cities metropolitan area. Representative Hudson, welcome to Washington Watch. It's an honor to have you.
It's great to be here, Jody.
All right, so let's start. What can you tell us about where things are as it relates to the ongoing fraud investigation?
Well, I think you framed the conundrum pretty well at the start, which is that we had our moment to shine a national spotlight of attention on this problem that those of us who live in this state have known about for many, many years, have been battling to get this kind of attention on so that we can start to actually solve it. And that happened on January 7th at the House Oversight Committee in D.C. And the same day while we were having that hearing is when the shooting of Renee Good happened. And as soon as that happened, it kind of took the oxygen out of the air of the conversation about fraud. And of course, we saw what happened over the weekend, which has continued that trajectory. But there is a definite link, obviously, between these two issues. And when you have an overwhelming majority of the people who are engaged in this fraud that is taking away taxpayer dollars from both the federal and state government coming from one community, which is the Somali community, obviously we have some immigration policy problems. And so I'm confident that the Trump administration is going to continue to follow through, even as they have to walk and chew gum with both the ICE insurgency currently happening in our state and dealing with the fraud, that they'll be able to handle both of those issues well.
Yeah, it's an incredibly complicated situation with so many plates spinning right now. And as you mentioned, you testified earlier this month before the House Oversight Committee, which I served on previously in my time in Congress. Thank you for taking time to serve and to testify there. But what are some of the current flaws in the system that you think may have contributed to fraud not being detected earlier?
Well, what you and I would call flaws, I think the people who came up with them would call features rather than bugs, because there's easy access, right? You can sign up easily, minimal verification. We pay you before we verify that you're doing what you say you're doing. There's minimal oversight in terms of checking up on spaces physically. I think the Nick Shirley videos have demonstrated that pretty effectively to the American public. And when efforts have been made, because they have, despite the fact that we have the Walz administration and Minnesota Democrats in charge of the state right now, within the state agencies themselves, there are good faith actors who are employed, and they've raised these red flags and been met with resistance and allegedly extraordinary amounts of retaliation for having the audacity to ask the wrong questions. And so that's kind of how things work in a nutshell. The way I explained to my 12-year-old is, here in Minnesota, we hand you a cartoon bag of cash and wave at you as we assume you're going to go house the homeless with it.
Incredible. Well, you're doing an incredible job in the legislature there in Minnesota, but also you're getting a good bit of a taste of what it's like in D.C., and there are some Republican members of the U.S. Senate Committee, specifically the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, also known as HELP. But they've announced that they want to launch a task force aimed at rooting out fraudsters who are abusing federal funding. What's your thoughts on that? Does it need to be on the federal level?
Oh, Absolutely. Of course it does. And it's for the same reason that the investigation surrounding ICE activity and incidents in Minnesota needs to be at the federal level, because we cannot trust the people who are empowered in our state. The Democrats have been in charge of Minnesota for over 20 years. They have entrenched themselves. They've become extraordinarily arrogant and brazen. They think they can get away with literally anything. And I could go on and on and on with examples about that. But the same folks who are calling ICE Gestapo and fascists and Nazis and saying the same thing about you and me, by the way, and everybody who votes with Republicans, they cannot be trusted to investigate either the fraud or these immigration incidents with any degree of fidelity.
Yeah. Well, listen, while I have you, and you brought it up, some of these other things, I want to get your thoughts on the anti-ICE protests. What has really been the impact on the communities there? What are you seeing and hearing up close?
A lot of frustration, a lot of misunderstanding and fear. And of course, that chaos is intentional. It's been fostered very intentionally by Tim Walz, the chair of our state Democrat Party here in Minnesota, and as well as I can see, virtually every Democrat up and down in any position of power, particularly Mayor Jacob Frey, Attorney General Keith Ellison. They have intentionally created this scenario of conflict by refusing to abide by the supremacy clause of the United States Constitution, by refusing to cooperate with federal law enforcement, by encouraging people, by delegitimizing them, calling them names like we just talked about, saying they're not real law enforcement, which is something this governor has done, and then seeking activists out to confront them, and then defending that federal crime, which is exactly what it is. It is a federal crime to impede law enforcement, characterizing that as lawful protest and peaceful observation. All of this is intentional, and it's created an atmosphere where people are confused. They don't understand, because a lot of folks still want to lend some sort of credibility and credence to their governing authorities, that they can trust that they have some sort of good faith effort. But in this case, you can't. These folks need to be out of power. They cannot be trusted to handle the situation.
Well, I certainly hope that we're going to be able to lower the temperature, and perhaps the deployment of the National Guard will help. Based on the last segment, I don't know if that's going to help or not. We'll all wait and see. But I want to thank you so much for joining us today on Washington Watch. Minnesota State Representative Walter Hudson of District 30A. It's an honor to have you on Washington Watch. Thank you for your input today.